to May.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Can you move your chair just a little bit this way?
Yep.
Let's see. Let's get a little sound check. Let's hear something.
Let's hear something. Let's see how the sound's working on this gadget. This piece of advanced electronic technology.
That's good. All right. Well, just you can just like. Well, let's talk about the early years. How old were you when you were born?
0.
Oh.
Did you turn it on yet?
It is on. So
Yeah.
if you want to talk a little bit, you can. I'm just going to try and find a different microphone.
Actually, when I was born, well, it depends. I could have been 9 months old, or I could be 0. It's a question of when does life begin. Now, the priest says that life begins at conception. I think the Protestant minister believes that life begins at birth, but the rabbi says that life begins when the kids move out of the house and the dog dies. Or the hamster dies.
Looking for.
Suppose I can just ramble on, or just thoughts, crazy thoughts like who gave me how much money for my bar mitzvah, and which presents I remember.
All right, go ahead. I'll pick that one.
Okay. I think it was after my bar mitzvah. I came home, and I had all these envelopes full of money. And before my parents got in the house, I opened up all the envelopes and took out all the money. And my mother came in and was in a state of panic because she was never going to figure out who gave me what. But I was a clever little kid, and I had written down what was in each envelope. And the only bar mitzvah presents I remember were, one relative gave me $2, so I've always remembered that one.
Is that good or bad?
That's bad. If that was good, what would everybody else have given me? The second gift I got was a book from, I think it was Irving Albert. He gave me a book of Ernie Pyle's war reporting. And Idella's husband gave me a trip to Boston to see my first Major League Baseball game.
You remember him?
Yeah, Charles, I think his name. Yeah, Charlie, yeah. So those are the 3 gifts I remember. So, if anybody gave me 10 or 15 or 20 bucks, it just, couldn't remember that.
Well,
kids remember certain things, so I think you have to remember when you're dealing with young relatives, if you do things for them, they're going to remember them when they grow up. Like my Aunt Idella and my Aunt Betty, they used to go on vacation. I don't know if they went together, but from their jobs. And they would send me a picture postcard. I think my Aunt Betty sent me one from Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I remember it was the moon over the Atlantic Ocean. And either she or Idella brought me a little cannon, from, I don't know if that was from Virginia also. And I remember those things.
Tell me about your bar mitzvah and studying for it. Did you go to Hebrew school?
Yeah, I went to Hebrew school. I don't know exactly when I started. Probably maybe 3 years or so before my bar mitzvah. And, we learned how to read Hebrew without knowing what anything meant. Which incidentally, pointed out that today among the Muslims, the Muslims that aren't Arab speaking, like the Indonesians, they learn Arabic by rote just to read it, the way we learned Hebrew. And they don't understand the words any more than we did. But evidently they all believe that God hears this pronounced in the holy language, and that's the right thing to do. So I went to Hebrew school with a lot of my friends. Right after my bar mitzvah, I guess I just stopped being religious, having reached the age of reason.
Check. All right, hold on a second. Check. Check.
Is it off now?
Check. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Alright, let's give you this. This is going to sound a whole lot better.
So you're going to erase all that other stuff?
Oh no.
So you don't edit this, you just...
Someday.
Yeah, but I mean, that's cool. Do you do this at bar mitzvahs and have the bar mitzvah guy, boy, talk at all?
Yeah, but I don't mic them up.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let me hear you speak.
Okay, here we go. What shall we talk about today?
That's good. Okay, one more time.
Okay, let's start talking.
Good.
Get a little history down.
Okay, so where was your bar mitzvah?
Where was it? I don't know where it was.
Was it a synagogue or?
Probably. It was at the, well, there were two shuls. My grandparents went to one and my father went to another because they came from different parts of Europe. I'm not sure which.
Wait, which grandma?
On my mother's side. They went to the shul up on this Chestnut Street. My father went to one on Dwight Street.
They were both Orthodox, I guess.
Well, yeah, pretty Orthodox, but people worked on Saturday and they drove to shul and they ate out in non-kosher restaurants outside the house. I guess there's a whole variety of being Orthodox or not, from absolutely nothing to every possible thing, like women shaving their heads and wearing wigs and all that. So, yeah, I don't recall. What I do remember is in my time, very few of the bar mitzvah boys' friends were invited. It was all their parents' friends. So I don't even think there were any other young kids at my bar mitzvah, just all adults. Where nowadays, the kids invite all their friends and everything.
Was there a luncheon?
Yeah, there was food there, I guess, yeah.
At the synagogue?
Yeah, I think it was at the synagogue. I don't really remember. Didn't make much of an impression on me, I guess. I gave a little speech, one in Yiddish and one in English, which I'd memorized. And I was in a lot of plays during that time. I guess I could remember parts for plays and things and speeches and had them all memorized.
At home, your parents spoke primarily what language?
Oh, just English, that's all. They only spoke English.
And how was their English? Well, your mother...
My mother was born in this country. I thought my father's English was very good. Although a friend of mine last year told me that my father had an accent, but I didn't recognize it. A lot of things about your parents you don't realize. I remember once my mother asked me if I thought she was fat, and I just said no, because I never thought about it. I never looked at her that way. In fact, sometimes you don't see your parents at a full distance. You only see their face because you're just looking at them. You're not looking at their stomachs or anything else.
They didn't speak Yiddish at home at all?
Not at all. Well, just some, Yiddishisms like, I don't want to schlep this across the street. They throw in a couple of words like that, but people are doing that today.
But were they fluent in Yiddish?
My mother probably was. Her parents probably spoke Yiddish to her. My father was. That was his first language. And I remember he told me when he came over to this country, he went to evening school at Chestnut Street Junior High School, and they only spoke English. And I remember him saying to me, they would say something and we would say, "Vos mentos?" What does that mean? And it was total immersion, I guess. But I know his English was good because he would listen to, Jack Benny on the radio and laugh at all the jokes. But by then he had been in the country, quite a few years. I guess he got to the country when he was about 16. So, the time I was born and old enough to listen to Jack Benny, probably in his 40s or whatever. So, and of course he had a business and he was talking English to the customers. So he was using it, But his parents, I don't think they spoke any English. We would visit them on Sundays once in a while.
No English?
No, they would speak Yiddish to me, but they didn't say very much. They'd say, "Come over here," and they'd squeeze my arm and tell me I was skinny or something. They'd say that in Yiddish, Then they died soon after that while I was very young. So they probably didn't learn it. Well, I don't know. I don't think they learned.
Which grandparents were you talking?
My father's parents. My mother's parents spoke English. Probably had a little accent, I guess.
Just had a question about your father. Of course, I immediately forgot it. Did he ever talk about the old country?
No. He never talked about it. And many years later, when I was sent over to Europe to work, he said something like, "Why would anybody want to go to Europe?" Because I guess he had very bad experiences over there. Oh, he talked a little bit about the old country. He said during the First World War, all these Russian soldiers were going west toward the Germans, I guess. And I think they were selling bread to the soldiers as they went by. And he said very few came back. There were just so many casualties in the First World War. Now, he came over here in 1921, so he was over there during the war. And I guess these hordes of soldiers just came through his town, and they never came back. They all got slaughtered like the British and the French and Germans. And when people ask me where he was from, I have to remember he was born. When he was born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in the Galicia section, which was Russian-speaking or Polish-speaking, but it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But when he arrived in this country, that empire had been dissolved because the First World War had ended, and that was all broken up into, I don't know, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, Poland, all parts of it. So he was born in one named place, but by the time he got here, if they asked him, I think he said, I saw some paper, he said, I think it said Poland on some sort of birth certificate or something. Because maybe Poland had control of it after the First World War. Maybe they're given that part of the land.
Do you have any of those papers?
Naturalization? No, I have the ship manifest. That's all I have. Yeah.
They always had a store. That was the only business he had?
No, he worked, he told me I guess he was peddling fruit or something from a truck with his friend Sam Gold, whose son Bernie, a good friend of mine. And then they went to work at General Electric, I think he said. And they were working so fast, the union people told them to slow down, you're spoiling it for us or whatever. So then they left that.
In Springfield?
Yeah. And I don't know if it was right after that he bought this little store. I guess he had it before I was born. Between General Electric and the Brightwood Market, I don't know what he did. He didn't really talk to me very much about things because he'd get up very early in the morning. It was still dark, lots of times. Because I always remember saying goodbye. I'd kind of wake up, hearing him rustling around in the kitchen. And I'd say, bye, Dad, and he'd say bye, and he'd go off to work. And he'd work pretty late. And then during the war years, he was working very late, and he'd work 6 days a week. So I didn't really see him too much.
And your mother was in the store too?
She was in the store, but I don't know when she started there. She would go in a little later. She'd go in like 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever. When we lived in the North End, I guess she would walk, probably 7 or 8 blocks. When we lived in East Forest Park or wherever we were, she would take the bus.
East Forest Park?
Well, Gillette Avenue.
Oh.
I think that's called East Forest
But
Park.
that's the only 2 places you ever lived?
No, when I was born, we lived on Dwight Street, right across from Lincoln School. Yeah. It's over in, I've forgotten the names of the streets. It was near Cumberland Street, I think, and I've forgotten the names of the street. Harriet Street.
And that was an apartment building?
That was an apartment building. Lived on the 2nd floor.
Is that still there, that building?
Building's still there. I went to see it, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and they had built a porch on the 1st floor level, I think, and there were a couple of Puerto Rican people there, and I started talking to them in Spanish, and I said, I lived here 50 years ago, and the guy turns to his wife and said in Spanish and points at me, he lived here 50 years ago. And I said, I went to that school across the street over there. And he turns to his wife and says, and he went to that school across the street over there. We talked a couple of minutes and then took off. But it's all Spanish speaking now, I guess, the North End.
Did they ever tell you how they met?
No. I never asked them. I probably would have if I had asked them. But I remember asking my mother once, I said, would you have married Dad if he couldn't speak English? And she said, oh, no. So by then he could speak well enough. Because if you're working and you got to talk with the boss or whatever, you're dealing with some sort of people, you're using it. So he'd probably pick it up pretty fast. He was young.
How close was the family? How close was he with his brothers and sisters and his parents?
Well, we used to visit his parents. He used to take me on Sundays to visit his parents. I don't think my mother went. I don't know if she cared for his parents or he cared for her parents, but that doesn't matter. They cared for each other, so they got married. But he would go over and see, I think he was devoted to his parents. He would visit them and take me along, and they lived on the 2nd floor a couple of blocks away. And on the 1st floor, Walter and George Jasinski lived with their parents, my Uncle Harry and Aunt Anna. So
That's Calhoun Street?
Yeah, Calhoun Street, yeah.
Oh, that was that close to Gillette Avenue?
No, it's close to East Hooker Street, where we were living before we moved to Gillette Avenue. We lived on Dwight Street until, I don't know, maybe I was 5 or 6 or so. Then we moved to East Hooker Street.
That's where my mother was born. Did she ever live on Dwight Street?
I don't think so. Oh yeah, she did. She lived there. Because I remember she stuck her arm through the crib, and I yanked it, and it dislocated her arm or something, and she took her to the hospital. And they brought her back. She had this cute little sling on. I thought it looked so cute. They said, you shouldn't do that. I said, oh, all right.
What can you tell me about my mother? She might not see this. Pretend she won't see this.
Well, I think we said it already. We didn't hang around when we were young, and then she went off to college. wrote to her a lot. She still has some of the letters. Mentions it to me sometimes. She went to LaSalle, which was a junior college then. It's a full college now. And, I was off. Once I was off at college, and then I just got a job, and I was just never home after that.
Well, why do you think the two of you are so completely opposite?
Why are we well, what does opposite mean?
Well, she's... let's just say... critical.
Well, my wife's critical too. Maybe women are like that, meticulous, looking for perfection, this sort of stuff. Well, maybe I was going to say maybe she'll change when she gets older. She's older already. Because I can just take things or leave it, you know, or they're not too fussy about details. I don't know if she was always like that growing up. I remember once I bought you a set of weights when you lived in Converse Street. A little small set, kids. And when I gave them to you, you just squealed with joy. I never heard such a squeal. And she wouldn't let you have them. She said you're not old enough or something. And then once I said to her, have you taken Lynn to the ice capades or something? She says, no, she's not ready for it yet. Something like that. And we had taken our kids, we schlepped them off to France with a suitcase full of diapers for Hillary, 3 kids, and we go off to France with them. I can't imagine doing that, you know, having done it or imagine doing it again. So maybe she was kind of critical too early, or early, and I don't know. People are just different genes or something, you know. Our genes aren't exactly the same.
Well, would you say that either of you take after your mother or father in any way?
Well, I don't think they were. Well, it depends what you mean by critical. If you're critical about things, how things are in the house, all the dishes are.
I mean, in general, do you find yourself with
I don't take
father
after
or mother's demeanor or?
Well, certainly as far as interests go, no. I mean, I was American born, playing baseball and this and that. My father had no interest like that. His interest probably had to do with talking with his friends from Europe that were living in Springfield on weekends. Otherwise, he was working, you know. We used to play cards. They used to play cards, to play pinochle at our house. And if somebody made a mistake, he'd start hollering at him. He'd holler at my maternal grandmother, you know, if she made a mistake. And all I know is that they were all hollering, all these relatives, you know. And they would play for nickels or dimes, and I would sit next to them, and I would arrange all the nickels in little piles and dimes and stuff, you know. And but it was pinochle. That was a big deal. They came over and played pinochle a lot. So he had his other interests. I didn't play cards at that time. I played board games. And my mother's interests, well, she wasn't a reader, so there were no books around. She didn't read. She worked, and I guess she had her friends. She played cards once in a while, but she wasn't really into it, I don't think, like he was. But, you know, Kay may know more about it. She knew my parents much better than I did, because she saw them get sick. She was home, you know, longer. And
when you say your father's friends from Europe, you mean just people who just from that area, or you think you actually knew people from his town?
Oh, probably from the area, I would say. And then they'd probably meet other Jewish people after he got. Well, he would have some friends here, and then maybe meet some new ones. I don't know. It's just that they were all from Europe and spoke Yiddish, you know. So those are his friends, you know. And all of their children we hung around. All of the children of these guys knew each other like the fathers knew each other.
I guess they preferred that you hung around the Jewish kids.
Well, yeah, we just did. Although when I was playing ball, there was a lot of non-Jewish kids on the street. They were mainly Jewish kids, but non-Jewish kids, we all played together. And, you know, our parents would say, you know, what are you playing with these kids for? And there was one Christian kid who's, I guess her mother didn't want him to play with us or something, but all of us ignored our parents. We played together, that's all.
I got 1 minute left on the tape.
Yeah, all right.
Any, want to do, you ever watch 60 Minutes?
Yeah, I'd watch 60 Minutes.
Do a little, who's the guy at the end who always speaks?
Rooney.
Yeah.
Right.
He just talks about something for a minute. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Nothing really humorous. I remember at my 50th high school reunion, I got a call or a letter or something, and I didn't go. And the reason I didn't go was because all the Jewish kids hung around together. And in the high school, it was a 3-year high school. So all the Jewish kids were together from 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And if I just went to my reunion, if everybody just went to their own reunion, we would have gotten split up into 3 parts, and yet we'd really want to see all of us together. So I said I'm not going because the kids that were a year behind me and the ones a year ahead of me won't be there, and those were my friends too. So I didn't go. They should have had some sort of Jewish reunion. But we did all hang around together, the Jewish kids, and sit together in the lunchroom. And the Greek kids, I remember the Greek kids, Xenophon, Papuano, and Socrates, Kajakis, and they all had Greek names, and they had a basketball team called the Athens Olympians, I remember that. So they would hang around together, so it was sort of, not quite a melting pot the way people call America. The groups pretty much hung around together, especially after school, I'm pretty sure.
But there was no anti-Semitism, no name calling, or...
Nah, no. That never really came up. Maybe the teachers, I don't know, if they didn't like Jewish kids, they could lower a grade, but, nothing was overt. There's no problem there.
All right. I think I'm flashing here, so...
You're flashing?
Yeah, that means a taste
Yeah,
thing.
I know what it means.
Okay.
I know what it means.
I think that's good for part 1.
Good. So, yeah, if there's going to be a part 2, write down some questions. As you think of them, have a little book. Part 2 in the future, run over and write down the question. I have to do that with stuff.
Well, I think what would be ideal is to get my mother and you together.
And contradict each other, and she'll be all critical. We'll start fighting.
Well, this way you can really, because when you
that's right. Yeah,
concentrate just on your parents, and you'll really
Then-
remember this. Oh yeah, I remember that. No, that's not the way it happened. This is the way it happened.
or not even arguing about whether it was this way or that way, but I forgot about that, and then add to it. That kind of stuff. Sure, that's good. Yeah. But when she comes here a couple times a year, doesn't she? Just outside of New Haven, and my grandmother kind of ran one of the boarding houses there or something, and I would go down, stay there a couple of weeks or something. And I remember Walter and Dottie Rome were down there one summer, and Larry, or Lippy, we used to call him Lippy Finkelhoff, whose grandmother, forgot her first name, owned the property. He'd be...
Gashan.
Yeah. Is that her name? I don't know. So he'd be there, and I'd play around with him. There were some rocks there we used to climb. I remember the rocks. So I'd go to Woodmont in the summer. I don't know if I went 3 or 4 summers, maybe 2 or 3. We'd picnic Sundays. Go for drives, in the old Ford. Mainly I was playing softball with the kids on East Hooker Street, or street games with the kids,
Let's see. What else is there?
Nothing else. I don't remember anything else.
Do you recall a time that when Betty and Louis got married and they had Philip and he died? Was that spoken of?
I guess it was mentioned because I knew of it. Yeah, I knew of it.
Do you want to ask any questions about when he was a little boy?
What did you do?
Go sit
I
next to
played.
him. Be in there.
Want to sit on my knee?
What did you do?
I played. Played ball, played baseball, played hide and seek, outside. We used to play in the street all the time. And sometimes the Iceman would come.
I see.
He would bring big blocks of ice because they didn't have refrigerators. You had like a little cabinet and you buy this big chunk of ice and you put it in there and it would keep all the food cold. But then we'd all go over to his ice truck and ask him for a piece of ice, and he'd have this little ice pick and he'd chop up a little piece and give it to us. And we'd suck on it like it was a popsicle. We always loved that in the summer. It was great.
Do you recall, did you always have a radio in the house?
Yeah, we always had a radio.
And do you recall when you got your first television?
Probably when we moved to Gillette Avenue in the 50s, although a friend of mine had one a little earlier. This was very interesting, and I was talking to one of my friends about it. Of all of the guys I hung around with, I think only one had an American-born father. And he was the kid who'd play catch with his father would buy him baseball gloves, and they were always buying the latest stuff. He was the first guy that bought a fiberglass insulated winter jacket and was telling us all about it. And a rechargeable General Electric portable radio. So they're always getting the new stuff. They'd always buy Buicks. I don't know. Different families would always buy different cars. We were always getting Chrysler products after that, Ford. And our fathers were, I don't know, they were just working, and they had a European background, and they weren't into all this fun and games and buying all this and all this kind of stuff. So that was kind of interesting.
What does it do?
Can you help me?
Help you where?
I can't get to a game.
Oh, we're gonna be
I
done.
startled my car.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna be done in just a couple minutes. So the first TV you got was?
Probably after we moved to Gillette Avenue. But we used to go to visit this other fellow, and they had a Zenith with a circular screen. And I remember watching one of the first baseball games, and it wasn't coming in, it was a little blurred, and he said, "I'll fix it, I'll focus it." And it was so amazing. I said, "You don't have to. I can see a guy running with the ball, or whatever." So we'd go up there, and TV was a big deal. People who had a TV set, they'd either invite, or neighbors would just come around, and they had TV dinners and TV trays. I don't know if it's not much for TV trays anymore. TV dinners, we don't call them that, do we? Do we call them just frozen dinners or something? Frozen food, yeah. So that was a big deal to go over to somebody's house who had a TV set, and they have to serve popcorn or food or stuff or whatever. But pretty amazing when we first saw it. It was the old black and white circular screen. But we always had radios. We listened to all the comedy programs, Jack Benny and Amos and Andy and Fibber McGee and Molly, Captain Midnight. I used to listen to Captain Midnight. He said, "Send in for your secret decoder, and we're going to give you a message at the end of the program about how it happened, what's going to happen tomorrow." And I would send in and get it, and I decode the message. And
Did they put TV on commercial?
Did they have what? They have commercials?
About TV?
it was probably commercials, yeah. It was all black and white. There were no color TVs.
What kind of?
In 1996.
Well, yes, it is then. What kind of radio or TV shows did your parents watch?
Well, the radio shows, you listen to the comedies at night,
Rather than music.
Oh, yeah. There's no music in the house. No record player or anything. No classical music. No books. No talk about you have to go to college when you get out of high school. I don't even know why I went to college.
Well, what did you think your father thought you were going to do after high school?
We never talked about it. I don't know. I'm beginning to think that because I was American born, I was as strange to him as he was to me. I said I could have had, my mother said, "Well, yeah, you could have had the store if you wanted it," but it never came up like, "Someday the spread will be all yours."
But you never worked in the store.
Oh, yeah, I worked in the store, yeah. Worked in the store. Yeah, I used to go and I delivered orders in the bicycle. They had a bicycle there with a big basket. deliver that or work in the store, fill the shelves, work with some customers when I got older. Yeah. Yeah, I worked in the store.
But I'm surprised they listen to comedies.
Yeah, listen to comedies. Well, I don't know if there was any. There wasn't anything really Jewish on the radio, but all the guys were Jewish. Eddie Cantor and Jack Benny. A lot of the comedians are Jewish, and they would listen to that. And the hit parade. We listened to the hit parade and try to guess what was number one that week. That was Lucky Strike. Remember that. When it came to TV, probably watched the early stuff. Milton Berle and who else? That was probably one of the early ones. Sid Caesar, maybe that was a little later, yeah. So they watched the comedy, that kind of stuff.
I'm thinking questions as you're speaking, and then as soon as you're done speaking, I forget the question. Do you recall things changing in the 60s? Do you remember any sort of Beatles craze or change in,
Well, let's see.
music
In '63, we were living in France, and the Beatles had come over to Paris. It was a big traffic jam downtown, but they weren't that famous yet, even though there were a lot of people. They hadn't come to America, I don't think, to get on the Ed Sullivan Show, which is a big deal. But I was working in France in '63 and '4 and '5, so we were kind of cut off from, I don't know, the Flower Child stuff over here and Woodstock and so forth. I don't know. I was busy by then in the computer field and didn't pay much attention to that stuff. And I'd just gotten married. And then I did it again, I don't know, a month later, 2 months later. Same thing, comes back with a little sling. It's kind of cute. It wasn't out of viciousness. I guess took her arm through the cage and I just pulled it or something. So then we moved to East Hooker Street. We lived on the first floor, and next door to us lived my mother's mother, my grandmother, and I guess my two aunts, Betty and Idella. So they lived there, next door. And then we finally moved to Gillette Avenue. Probably, I don't know, I was probably 15 or something like that.
How big were these apartments?
There were 4 rooms. You had a kitchen, bedroom, living room, another bedroom.
So you shared a bedroom?
Yeah, shared a bedroom with my sister, yeah. But then when we moved to Gillette Avenue, she got a bedroom, and I slept either in the den or down in the basement. It was finished off, and there was a cot and stuff.
So Betty didn't get married till...
I don't know when she got... I don't know, yeah. Betty or Idella, they got married later.
Did you like Betty and Idella's husbands? Were they nice?
They were nice, yeah. Betty's husband, Louis, he was born in Europe, so he had an accent. He was an upholsterer. And, of course, I didn't see him that often because he lived in Hartford after they got married. He was kind of a humorous guy, joked and everything. And then he had a brother, I forgot his brother's name, he was older. And I remember when he got really old, he told me he started studying philosophy. He was reading Aristotle, which is interesting because I kind of started the same thing. Maybe like a year ago, I started reading philosophy books. Idella's husband, Charlie, he was like the only American-born male around. He liked baseball. Nobody else knew anything about it, cared about it, thought it was crazy. Why am I wasting my time playing ball when I did, And so he took me to my first baseball game, Major League. He was a Yankee fan. He was a real American guy,
Your parents, I hate to be as generic as what were they like, but
Well,
Like,
because they were working, I didn't see that much of them really. Because I was always playing outside after school. All the kids in the neighborhood were always playing in the street. Baseball season, we were playing baseball in the street, you know, and the cars would come. We'd say, car coming, they all get out of the street. And, you know, we'd have bats and balls and play right in the street, and then we'd play football in the street. There was a lot of kids there. We played hide and seek and kick the can and all kinds of games, you know, during the summer weather when it was warm after supper. We were always playing out there. So, didn't do much with my parents. My father would take me to Forest Park on Sundays, to the zoo, and
not your mother.
no, she would sleep late, I guess. He would do various things on Sunday. I remember going to the Forest Park many, many Sundays. I don't know if it was every one. And he would point out the animals. And when you learn those animals and things when you're young, and you don't learn any others, that's all you ever know. So I knew a wolf and the fox and the deer and whatever, the lions and whatever. So he would either take me to Forest Park Zoo, or else we would go down to Dwight Street, where there's like a lot of Jewish guys would show up, all my father's friends from Europe, and all the kids. So we'd kind of run around and make noise or whatever, and all the guys were talking and everything. And then we'd go down to Bowles Lunch, which was on Main Street, and Bowles Lunch was owned by a guy named Bowles, who started the Springfield Republican or the Union. I guess he was pretty well known. I don't know if he was ever mayor or not. It was in a building right on Main Street, and kind of like a cafeteria. You order at the counter, and a waiter would bring it to, you know, and they'd get coffee and stuff. I'd always get a milk and toast maybe, and there was a funny little waiter who always limped. I remember him, old guy, probably worked there for years and years, you know, a little white apron on around his waist. So it was either Bowles Lunch, Dwight Street with the other Jewish men and their kids, or Forest Park. Otherwise, my father was working all week, and you know, I'd leave in the morning. It wasn't 9 to 5. It was like, you know, 6 to 8 or whatever. Especially during the war, he was working late at night. Saturdays, he'd work really late, and there was rationing. But because he had a business, he was able to buy gasoline for the car. He had a C rating or whatever it was. And he'd get all these ration coupons and coins from people, so that they were allotted a certain amount of butter and sugar and maybe coffee, I don't recall. And then at night, sometimes he'd come home and I would help count out all the little ration coins. They were little red and green chips, kind of. I guess some were 1, some were 5, I'm not sure. And then there were these paper coupons, and he would collect them all, and I guess my mother would write down how many there were. They had to keep track of them or something. So I didn't see too much of my father except on Sundays. And my mother was working, but the person who was a real influence in my life was my Aunt Betty. I don't know the chronological order of this, but she took me to Johnson's bookstore downtown. And there was a second-hand section way in the back. And she said, you can get 5 books for a quarter here. You know, and she'd pick out some books. And I used to go down. After that, I was going down there getting used books, and she really got me into reading and everything. She'd take me to the Memorial Square Library. Now, Memorial Square Library, I don't know if she pointed it out. She must have, or somebody did. There was a plaque in there. It said this was donated by Andrew Carnegie, who sold all his, I think he was in steel. He sold all his factories. He gave all the money and built libraries all over America. And there was a plaque inside the front hall. Now, when you go to that library, if you go to the left, downstairs where the kids roam, but if you're facing the building, there's a stairway, and that's the main entrance. And I remember one day, you know, we went down. She would take me to the story reading classes. They would read stories. I used to like that. We came out one day, and she said, someday you'll go up there where the big people go to get books. And I could hardly wait. So she really got me into books and reading, and then she would take me places. She took me to the Museum of Science on the Quadrangle the first time, and then later I would go back alone. And she took me to a concert. They had concerts next to City Hall. There was a big auditorium, and I remember I heard Strauss's famous waltz, Blue Danube Waltz, full orchestra.
That was probably my uncle conducting.
What was his name?
Milton Harris.
No, somebody else. It was a guy who was a pistol shooter. He was a competitive pistol shooter in competition. Probably before that, I don't know. And you always hear the Blue Danube Waltz. You might see it in a what do you call those cartoons with the cat, Jerry, Tom and Jerry. Somebody's playing the piano and you learn all this classical music that way. And you're bum bum bum. Then I heard it with a full Cleveland orchestra. It was just magnificent. I was so impressed. Then they played a symphony by Haydn, I think, and I remember that.
So it's just the two of you.
Yeah, she had a subscription series or something. So she took me to that, and she took me to the museum and the library. Real cultural influence, really, very, very. Remember that. And I never treated her very well. Meaning, I never went to visit her in Hartford, and when we rarely went, she'd say, why don't you come visit me? And I go, yeah, but it's the way I am. I don't visit anybody except my nephews. Right, yeah. Idella was very nice. She didn't bring me along to all the, take me to these things, but she lived next door on East Hooker Street, and then she moved away. When she got married, she moved to New York, New Jersey, maybe New York, I don't know. Certainly New Jersey, and I visited them a couple times. They live in Passaic, New Jersey, and I visited them there once in a while. Then they moved to California to go to South America. I told my father one day, hey, I'm going to South America, December 1st, 58. And he said, you can't, your sister's getting married. I said, oh, geez, January 9th or something, she's getting married. I said, gee, I got a month, what should I do? So I went down to Cuba. Spent a month in Cuba, December of 58, when Batista was there and all these guys with machine guns on the corners, and you hear the cabbies saying, oh, Castro is getting closer, coming in from, closer to Havana. Then on December 31st, I left because it was getting dangerous. I should have stayed. And the next day, I think Castro marched into Havana. For a while, he was a good guy, so it was too bad I didn't stay around to see what it was like. But everybody was rushing to leave. Unfortunately, my Spanish was pretty good, and I was at the airport, the ticket terminal, and it's 5 or 6 deep, and I just knew enough Spanish to holler and get a ticket or whatever. And I think Batista's 2 sons might have been on that plane because it was said that they both left the same day on a commercial flight, but I don't know if it was the same one or not. So then I came back and went to her wedding, and then I went to South America after that.
Do you remember the wedding?
Not very much, no. I don't remember.
Do you remember how your parents felt about my father? Did they?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't talk about it to me. Probably to each other. Everybody's worried about their kids, who they're marrying, and whatever.
Were they? Was your mother a yeller, or was she?
Oh, you mean hollering?
Relaxed?
Oh, she was very relaxed. Yeah. My father had a pretty sharp temper, so he'd holler, at her. Even if it was an argument, he'd raise his voice a lot. But she understood that this is the way it was, and it really didn't mean anything. And
Was he a spanker?
no, he'd threaten maybe, but didn't really get spanked.
Did he keep allowance?
Yeah, I guess we got an allowance. I don't know how much it was. Actually, I just asked him. I say I need some money. He'd give me some money, as I got older, and I don't know. I suppose we got a little allowance.
Did he, during the war, did he talk about the war? Did he have any clue as to what was going on?
Well, he didn't, but I would look at the headlines and they'd have all these pictures of Europe with a Russian advance and the German retreat with these big arrows and stuff. So I knew there was a war going on. But I couldn't tell who was winning. I guess maybe later in the war, you could tell that the Germans were losing, the Russians were advancing, and of course then there was Pearl Harbor, and there was a lot of talk in the building, Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and of course then we officially entered the war after that.
Did he ever talk about people that he knew back in the old country that died?
He never talked about the old country.
He never mentioned his uncle that was there, the one uncle that never came.
No. No. Never talked about the old country. If I had asked him, I bet he would have just, told me anything I wanted to know, but I just didn't have any questions about it at the time.
Your grandmother, your mother's mother, did she work at all? How did she support herself?
I don't know. Well, if Betty and Idella were living with her, they were probably paying the rent, because they were both working. So, could have been that. I don't think she got any money from her ex-husband. I doubt it.
She probably didn't have any money.
Yeah, no, parents never talked about sex, health, or money. So, I have trouble when they ask for my parents' medical history when I go in for some examination or volunteer work at the hospital, and they ask, what disease in the family. I really don't know very much. We never talked about it. Somebody gets sick, and then, keep the kids out of it. They don't go to weddings, they don't go to funerals, and whatever.
Do you remember your great uncles? Willie
Well, we would
and
meet
Harry?
once in a while, and they were friendly to me, but we never go visit them. We wouldn't visit Uncle Willie or Uncle Morris. Run into him maybe at the holidays or something, but ran into them enough to know who they were. But that's about all. We didn't really have any.
Did they look anything like your grandfather? Even though they were only half brothers, but.
Well, I don't know. I didn't see my grandfather, my father's father, very often. Just on some of those Sundays we went over there. He was wearing a yarmulke, and he was usually sitting down, and I guess he'd say a few words in Yiddish, how are you, or whatever.
But he always wore yarmulke.
I think he was wearing, he usually wore one.
What time is your thing?
11:15.
Let's see. Do you remember who was the last grandparent that died of yours?
Probably my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Because I remember, I think I went to that funeral. And before you go to the cemetery, I guess you have to drive by the last place they lived.
Really?
Yeah, so I think we drove past the Jewish Home for the Aged. I think it was up on Carew Street or somewhere, one of the first Jewish homes for the aged. And as the hearse came by, a lot of the people there were like out on the lawn. I don't know if they waved or something, like in tribute or saying goodbye to a friend that was there. I used to write her letters a lot, but I'd write them in Yiddish so that when she read them, English words would come out, because I didn't know how to speak Yiddish. But I knew the alphabet, so if I wrote, how are you, I would write, hey, Aleph, whatever you have to do, so she could just read it and out would come English. And she liked that. I never said very much, hello, how are you, I'm fine, but she appreciated that somehow. And I would do that. I don't know. Yeah.
Let me see. Did you, I guess she didn't talk about the old country.
No. Nobody did. They were glad to get out of there, They don't like to talk about bad experiences.
It's too bad that they never said.
See, nowadays people would ask more, I think. Well, older people, they start getting interested. Young kids, they don't. They got their friends. A lot of kids are raised by their peers and not their parents anymore. So, they don't ask this stuff.
Do you think your parents were good parents?
Yeah, they're good. Sure. They're busy working, but, good parents.
On the summers, did you have vacations? Did you guys go anywhere?
Oh, we used to go for car rides when the weather was nice, whether it was school year was still in or not. I think my father first had an old Ford, and we all pile in the car. My mother, father, Kay, and I guess Idella and Betty would come along. I don't know how we all fit in if all of us were. Well, certainly my family was there, and then Betty and or Idella would be in. Maybe my grandmother. We'd sing songs and just the popular songs of the day in the car. We'd go for rides. We used to go to Luke Memorial Park. I think it's in Northampton. And picnic. We used to picnic up there. Bring food, and sit at one of those picnic tables.
Did you ever go to the beach?
Yeah, my maternal grandmother worked for Finkelhoffs at Woodmont Beach in I think it's East Haven. And one summer I went out there and visited her out there.
She was only married for 9 years, maybe?
Yeah, not too long. I was out in California when her husband died. Died at night. He had a heart attack, and it was pretty hard. Fortunate.
Were you staying with her at the time?
Yeah, I was staying with her. Yeah. And cousin Julia Runsdorf and her husband, I forgot his name. They helped out. It was nice that they were there at the time that he died.
But how did the boys take it?
I don't recall. I don't know if they were, well, must have been born by then.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Well, they would have been very
Yeah,
small.
yeah, they were, yeah.
Was your mother close with her mother?
Well, we lived right next door for a long time on East Hooker Street, so, we'd see them all the time. We'd go back and forth between the apartments, so forth. But my maternal grandfather, he was out of town. He wasn't around. And then one day my mother says, Zeta's coming in. He's coming in, and he's getting off at the bus stop or something. And I said, I want to go meet him. She says, okay, just walk down Main Street, and you'll meet him coming this way. And I walked down, I didn't meet anybody, and I came back, and he was there, because I didn't recognize him. I didn't know what he looked like. We just passed each other. And he looked at me, and he shook hands, and he said, Jak się masz? And that was Polish. And you said you're supposed to answer dobrze, or dobre. I don't know, Jak się masz? Dobre. One's Polish, one's Russian. And I always remembered that. And I said it to a couple of workers a couple of years ago. A friend of mine says, got some Polish workers, they're painting my house. And I happened to come by and I saw the guy and I said, Jak się masz? And he said, dobre. So, get that stuff when you're young, man. You just remember it.
And when he came, where did he stay?
I don't recall where he stayed. He didn't get along with his ex-wife. They were divorced. He called her the high blood pressure. He said, oh, the high blood pressure's next door. I can't go in there or something like that. It was funny. He was always joking. And I remember once, I don't know, I was in the house. I had my pajamas on. I don't know if I was playing with Kay or not. And I had squatted down and bent over. And he just took a spoon and he dropped it in the back of my pajamas. And I don't know what it was. And I practically flew up and hit the ceiling. And he laughed. He just thought it was so funny. And he was always making jokes. And he was a tailor. And he would make me or get me these really nice wool suits that itched like crazy. But he would sew pajama bottoms inside, or linings, or my mother would. And when I wear the wool pants to school, I wear them over pajamas. And there was another friend of mine who did the same thing. He said, yeah, that stuff itches. Now I just love wool, and I wear it without anything under it. And even I wear a wool sweater when it's warm and raining out. I just wear a wool sweater on top, and it's great. It insulates you in the winter, and I like it better than fleece. It doesn't bother me against my skin. But
Do you recall that he ever got remarried?
no, I don't think he got remarried after I was born.
I think Idella said that he married again briefly.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that.
Cleveland. 'Cause that's where he was living, right, for a while.
Well, I don't know. I think once he came to Springfield, he just stayed there, and then he was put into the old home. He went into the Jewish home for the aged and said, He was all upset because he said everybody's old there. I don't want. Why am I here? Everybody's old. That's what everybody thinks, you know.
But he never lived with your grandmother.
I don't think so. I don't know where he was living.
Didn't he live in Boston for a while?
Yeah, there was Boston, Cleveland. I never got the story. Nobody ever talked about it. I guess Idella knows about it. And if you ask her, she'll tell you. And if you don't, it just never came up.
Did he ever talk about the old days?
No, never did.
Or his brothers and sisters?
Nothing. The only dealings we had were, why are you playing baseball? And he'd always look for some little non-Jewish kid to light the stove on Shabbos, and Saturday morning he'd holler out the window to one of the kids I was playing with, come on in, would you light the stove for me? And they couldn't figure out what this was all about.
Well, that brings up a good question. How religious were they? How did they only go on the high holy days? Did they keep a strict kosher house? Or your parents and all your grandparents?
Well, our house was kosher. And even at Passover, for Passover you're supposed to have a separate set of dishes. And so what do you do with the old ones? Well, there's always little schemes to get around what's in the Bible. So they would sell it to the rabbi. It's like an agreement. And then I don't know if any papers were passed, but the rabbi would buy all your year-round silverware and dishes.
I thought it had to be a non-Jewish person.
Oh, maybe the rabbi arranged for somebody to buy it. And then after Passover was over, you'd get it back again. So even though it stayed in your house, it wasn't yours, so it was okay. But there's always these little tricky things which kind of made me doubt about the whole religious aspect. For example, you weren't supposed to milk your cows on the Sabbath. And the Bible says something about you must let the milk fall on the ground. So they take a pail with a stone in it and milk the cow, and it was going on the ground because there was a stone in there, and yet you got all the milk. So there's always sneaky ways of getting around some of these rules. Right.
And did you go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah?
Oh, yeah. You'd go, and I was bored out of my mind, And I'd have to go to this little shul with my father. But what I really wanted to do was leave and go to the other shul where my grandparents went, because all my other friends were there. And we'd run around outside. There's these little pickers on the bushes, and we'd throw them at each other and throw them at the girls, get stuck in their hair and stuff. But we didn't know what we were reading. We could read it, we could mouth it, we could say it. But we were never really taught what all those words meant,
My mother. What's the age difference?
4 years.
So what was she like as a child? Was she?
Well, she didn't hang around with. She didn't play ball with us or anything, even though there were girls. A couple of girls would show up. We'd play softball over at the Lincoln School. We'd all walk down there and play.
Or was she like a hyper kid, or was she quiet like Jake? Or?
I don't recall. Because I just hung around with my friends. I didn't mess with her or her friends. I didn't even know who her friends were. I think she had a friend named Phyllis Perlman. I don't know if she lived upstairs from us or close by, but didn't do much.
So she was about 11 when you moved to the house?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
And then how soon after that did Idella come? The boys?
Well, I guess after her husband died, she stayed in California a while, then came. So I don't know what all these dates are.
It's going to be like 56, maybe. Something
No, early, I think.
54.
Oh, okay, he died in 54.
In 53 or 54.
Yeah.
Do you recall when she was dating, or when she met my father, or when you first met him?
Oh, she was going out with a guy named Chet. And whenever he called up and I answered the phone, I turned to her and I said, "You got a telephone call from Chet." And she get so angry. "Stop calling him that." So then she stopped going with him. Then she met your father, I don't know where. And he would call up, and His voice was deep, so my mother called him Deep Voice. So the phone would ring and I'd say, DV's on the line. But no, they went off, you know. Then one day she said they're getting married. I don't know, whenever that was, 59 or something. Now, in 58, I decided to take a year and